feel free to mention my 40-pound weight loss.
I might do that. Behold, everyone, it is I, EVS, Ethan Van Sciver. Welcome to Comic Artist Pro Secrets, another huge event. That's what we do here. I like to bring you the best of the best, and we have someone who, if this man is not a legend in comics, I don't know who is. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this guy has written everything from everything important to DC, everything important at Marvel Comics. And he's gone on to really underpin Boom Studios. He is a chief creative force now at Archie Comics. This guy's name is synonymous with comic books. Very, very proud to present Mark WAID.
That's me. Hey, sir, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good. What a great intro. I'm going to get you to follow me around for the rest of my life. Just give that, you know.
That's what we do here. We like to pump things up, you know. And let's be honest, it's fair. I mean, you have done a little bit of everything, and you know, one of my favorite things that you've done, as I just mentioned briefly, was your run on the Flash, which led to a kind of sub-creation that started me out at DC Comics. So we definitely have to talk about that. Let's see. So let's talk about your childhood. Let's talk about growing up in Alabama.
Yeah, in Nowhereville, Alabama, in the sticks.
How did you find comics in Alabama?
My dad. To be fair, my dad. I was 3 years old, I guess, when the Batman TV show hit with Adam West. For those of you who are way young, it's not the, when I say that, I don't mean the animated show. I mean the Adam West. But yeah, my dad started bringing comics home. I still remember the first one I ever saw. I still have it framed over my desk so that on days when I feel like, you know, maybe the world isn't going quite well, I can always look up at that and go, I got a great job.
Yeah.
So that was it, and I just never stopped after that. I never even went through one of those periods where, you know, you after high school or college, you kind of drift away from comics or whatever. I never went through that.
You know, that's fascinating because I think most of the people that I talk to, they kind of suggest that they did. I mean, me too. I mean, I always had superheroes around me as a child, but when I became a teenager, 15, I remember needing money to go on dates with girls.
Yeah.
And so
I didn't have that problem. So yeah.
Yeah. Were you wealthy?
No. What it was I was bumped up 2 years in school. So I was 15 and like as a senior, and so dating was not really an issue for me. It wasn't really, you know, and so by the time I get to college, I'm 16, 17, I'm still kind of, you know, just getting in a dating pool. So yeah.
You're like Doogie Howser.
Yeah, exactly. The Doogie Howser of comics, that's me. Yeah, it was, and I don't regret any of that stuff. It's just, you know, I don't regret anything in my life because it is what makes you you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it was. All my life, my grandparents, parents, you know, cousins would, you know, make sure I always had my habit fed. And, you know, it just took over when I was, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years old. I was buying everything.
Well, what was your first comic book? Do you recall?
Sure. It was Batman number 180. It's this great Gil Kane, Murphy Anderson cover of Batman wrestling with a big skeleton guy on the cover with in the deep rain while the guy's kicking Robin into an open grave. It's great. It's a great cover, and it's the first one that came out in my area after the Batman TV show. So I've seen the sales figures in the past, and it's like, you know, you've got Batman, you know, 172, 173. It's coming along. That's selling like a DC comic does. You get to like 179, which came out the week of the show, and then 180. 180 sold like 1 million copies with like a 97% sell through. So wow. It was just insane. So that was, of course, I got that comic because apparently every kid in the world got that comic.
That sounds like a dark cover for Batman to sort of coincide with the Batman TV show. That sounds like a lot of mystery and intrigue.
Yeah.
Rain, skeleton.
Yeah, it's not, and inside it's not much better. I mean, it's the guy, the whole idea is that this guy who's called Deathman keeps dying, but he's actually a Swami who actually fakes his death repeatedly, and Batman is just tortured by this. Bruce Wayne is lying awake in bed at night, sweating, having bad dreams about Deathman. I mean, in retrospect, it's a really creepy comic.
That's not something Adam West would do.
No, it's not. It's not Catwoman coming down, you know, stealing cat jewels. It's not the Joker making, you know, paintings out of whatever, you know.
So what was it? What was the comic book that made you realize?
Lost you there. Hang on.
Oh,
You there?
I'm here.
Okay, I lost it. What was the? And then you blinked out for a
What
second.
was the comic book that made you realize that you wanted to be a comic book writer, and why?
I didn't want to be a comic book writer. I didn't want to be a writer. I wanted to be an editor.
Really?
I didn't want to be a comic book writer until I kind of had to in my late 20s after leaving DC Comics. I never thought I'd be a writer because I grew up thinking these people have ideas all the time. How do you have this many ideas? I can't do this. But I knew I wanted to be involved in comics. So my heroes were like Julie Schwartz and and Stan Lee and guys like that who were behind the scenes at that point. And so that's what I wanted to be as a full-time editor. And I did that for a couple of years and left DC. And at that point, I still want to stay in comics. But because I was editing like Secret Origins, which was the anthology book, I was editing their Christmas anthologies. I was doing all the anthologies, which means that all those scripts were coming across my desk, right? From everybody, from I was Neil Gaiman's first editor there. I was like John Ostrander's editor. I was Christopher Priest's editor. And any name you can think of. And Alan Moore is the only guy in comics whose script I never touched. But that was a boot camp in how to write comics. I learned more in that 2 years than I could have learned 10 years on my own. So by the time I left, I was equipped reasonably well to at least start a career writing comics and make all my mistakes in the first 3 or 4 years.
I can't believe somebody wanted to be an editor. That seems like a job that you sort of take while you're learning, but like to aspire to be an editor. You just wanted to be around comics, it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And I wanted to have some say in the characters. I wanted to be able to give back to the characters in a way that they gave to me when I was a kid, right? So if I could get behind the scenes and work with Superman or Batman or whatever, and work with the artists and writers, that just intrigued me a lot. That being an artist or a writer I just never thought I could do it.
So was there a story though? Was there a comic book that made you realize this was your destiny to work in comics?
Tell you a story. It wasn't a comic. So 1970, January 15th, 1979. I'm sorry, nerd, I got it wrong. January 26th, 1979. It's the most important day of my life because I was, again, like I said, I left home. I was kind of knocking around. I kind of felt like nobody cared about me. There was other stuff going on in my family. To be honest, it was a rough time. And I just didn't bouncing around, from home to home. And not that I didn't have good parents. It wasn't working out. Does it make any sense so far? I mean, I'm not trying to paint myself out like Oliver Twist,
It's not like a teenager.
Yeah, and there's no villains in this story, and especially being 2 years younger than everybody in school, that didn't help either. So I was at a state where I really felt like nobody cared. I really honestly felt like nobody cared about me. And I went to see Christopher Reeve in Superman. And I saw it twice in a row. And man, I came out of that theater knowing that no matter what I did with the rest of my life, it was going to have something to do with Superman. It took me years to figure out why exactly the connection was there. And you'll get this. When I went in, I thought nobody cared. Well, Superman cares about everybody. Well, I don't care whether what your race, creed, or color is, what you're oriented. It doesn't matter. He cares about everybody. And so on some level, I knew, even though he's a fictional character, I felt like there was that connection that meant a lot to me. And that saved my life, man. So that was the day I knew, I liked going in a theater. I liked other stuff. I liked stage magic, and I liked, being a radio announcer maybe, or this or that. But when I came out of that movie theater, it was like Superman. That's it. That's my life.
Okay, so we're like brothers on that point. And
Yeah.
This is a character that I feel particularly protective over, and I've had to write long essays on Twitter. Like I'll write long Twitter threads about who Superman is because it seems like there's so much misunderstanding about who this character is. This is a superhero. When people say, what is a superhero? Well, Superman is a superhero. Superman is somebody who would give his life to save a stranger.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
in a cocaine heartbeat, man. I did a speech at Ohio University a little while ago, at Lake Erie College in Cleveland, Ohio. I did this a few weeks ago. I would do a convention. You do conventions. I do conventions. People come up sometimes and ask you about things. I get asked a lot of times to speak at colleges, and sometimes I'll say yes, and sometimes I'll say no. It depends on what my schedule is. Same as any convention. But this is the first time somebody came up to me. This woman came up to me and said, "I'm teaching a course in Superman at my college," and I said to her, "I'm lecturing in the class."
Yes.
Yeah. And so we worked it out. I went. Part of the appeal too was it's Cleveland, right? So I got to see the Superman stuff there. I got to see Siegel and Schuster's homes. But being able to give that speech and gave it to her class, and then gave it to a bigger auditorium that night. And I mean, I'll shortcut it for you. The shortcut is you get to the end. The point of the speech was, why does Superman matter in the 21st century? Why is he still significant? Why is he still a cultural touchstone? And to shortcut it, what I came down to was my favorite thing about Superman, the thing that I think is his greatest superpower, is that here's a guy who could have anything, do anything, take anything without anybody stopping him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead, he chooses to use his power selflessly and kindly and with compassion. And that teaches us over and over again as kids, it teaches us the lesson that true power is kind,
Mm-hmm.
that true power is compassionate. Or to flip it around, that kindness is true power. If you have compassion, if you have kindness, that's power. That's the kind of power that can change lives.
That's great. It's great to be able to do that.
So when I'm just saying, just so when we see it as kids, it makes sense. As an adult, it's hard to take simple lessons as an adult in a sort of a much darker or gray world than it is, when it's black and white when you're a kid. But still, I think honestly, every time you see that Superman S, that pings you back to that moment in childhood where you got it. That Superman is kind.
Yeah. Yeah, he's my hero. He always will be, and I'm glad you feel the same way about him, and for the same reasons that I do.
Yeah.
And they haven't. I was just talking to my dad about this because my dad is a big Superman fan too, and I just said, I really, when I saw those Christopher Reeve movies, I realized that what they did. I mean, first of all, the creative team pretty much behind The Godfather was involved.
Yeah.
And they really cared. I mean, they took the source material very seriously, as the creation of two Jewish boys from New York City who knew the Bible, and of course, the origin story of Superman being kind of some kind of allegory for Moses, and there's certainly a lot of Jesus Christ in the Superman story. Listen, those stories can't be improved upon. The feelings that come from those stories, well, they've served humanity for 2,000 years. And I don't think they can be improved upon. You can retell those stories in different ways. Those two movies, and they're not childish. They're not embarrassing. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
They're pure, and I miss that. I miss that in portrayals of Superman these days. I'm glad.
Yeah, the unapologetic way in which the character was presented. That's what we both miss. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No. That was exactly right. But let's get back to you, and let's talk about now. Let's rewind a little bit, because I really want to get the full story of your breaking into comics now. So at what was the point? What was your first job as an editor in comics?
I tell you, here's what happened. I was working at like Amazing Heroes, for Fantagraphics magazines, Comics Journal, for you kids in the audience back when there were such things as magazines, they were the comic book resources of their day, but on paper. And I was doing a lot of reporting for those. So I got in touch with every editor, every writer I ended up talking to in comics, and I managed to make connections, not intentionally, but you talk with everybody. You get to know everybody. I worked conventions a lot. I was the guy who picked you up at the airport and dropped you off and made sure you got a hamburger when you got in at 10:30 at night. And so all of these things helped me make connections. So when I went to Julie Schwartz and pitched a Superman story to him, he bought it on the spot. It was the greatest day of my life. I was like 21 years old. It's the greatest day of my life. And So I noodled around a little bit. You know, like I said, I didn't want to be a writer. I could do that one story. I thought that was kind of it. So I was working at Fantagraphics, working at Amazing Heroes and things like that. And I get a call. I get a call from Dick Giordano because they're starting up a new imprint at DC Comics. It's going to be a creator-owned imprint. They don't quite know what to do with it, but they're looking for young editors with, you know, an indie cred background, which I had at that point at Fantagraphics. And I got the call from Dick, and he made that offer, and I hung up on him because it was April 1st, and I was absolutely sure somebody was pranking me. And it wasn't until Dick called back, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is embarrassing, but okay, thank you. So I went in for that interview with Jeanette Kahn, Paul Levitz. The worst interview you can imagine. It was a train wreck. I went in. They weren't sure what the job was. They were interviewing like a half a dozen other guys in comics. Brian Augustyn was another guy who got called and interviewed, although we didn't know each other yet. But what happened was they weren't sure what the job was. So they were kind of looking for the applicants to sort of help them shape what the job would be, which wasn't clear when I came in the room. The other thing that wasn't clear was they thought I knew why I was there, and all I knew was it had something to do with editorial in DC. That's all Dick told me. So I walked in the room completely unprepared, and it was savage. I was nervous. I mean, it's my first time at the offices, and Jeanette's office, and there's Paul, and I remember the moment that it all went south. The exact moment was, because when I get tied up and when I get tongue tied, I just go for the joke. I just try to make connection through humor. So Jeanette asked me at some point, so what have you done in your life or in your experience that shows that you have the entrepreneurial ability to launch a company from the ground up? And I sat there like calendar pages flying by, right? Like spinning clocks. Like I'm there for an hour, it feels like. And finally I just stumble out with, I sold band candy in high school. And silence, because Jeanette is a wonderful lady, but our senses of humor never, ever clicked up in all the time I've known her. So I said that, and she just said, uh-huh. And then she wrote something on a pad, and I'm like, I'm out.
Smart ass on the pad.
Exactly, yeah. So I left that room knowing that I'd blown my one chance to pitch for the Yankees, right? Mm-hmm. And I find Dick and I said, why did you set me up like this? And Dick laughed and he said, didn't mean to, but it's okay. Look, we're going to find a place for you here sooner than later. And sure enough, a couple of months later, I got the call and I went to work there in July of 87, August of 87. Yeah.
Mm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome. All right. So when did you leave editorial work for freelance writing?
Around Christmas of 89, I left, and I don't do well in office environments. I'll take an office job every few years for a couple of years. Why? And I'll remember I don't work well in offices. You? How do you? I mean, when was the last time you were a paid employee somewhere?
When I was 15.
Yeah, exactly. If we didn't
freelance, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, God bless you if you can make a job work for you. It's just that the guys who are freelance just don't have the temperament. I don't think the freedom that you have. You know, I'm doing this at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my time. I'm not asking a boss if I can have a half hour off early so I can come do an interview. That sounds smug and superior. I don't mean it to sound that way at all. I'm just saying it's very inviting. So left, did freelance. Brian Augustyn by that time was my best buddy. And
tell me about Brian Augustyn. That was going to be my next question.
Oh man, it's the smartest, most capable editor you can imagine. Very funny, very sharp about story. And so he was editing Flash, and he gave me a shot doing this Flash like TV tie-in book where I did a story in that. And I said, okay, see, I can do a little bit of Flash. And I did a couple of other little things for Brian. And then the book came available. Now, the reason the book came available was because Bill Loeb's left to do Wonder Woman. He was my predecessor. But more importantly, the reason the book came available is because they were going to cancel it. Because the TV show had gone off the air. and the sales were not, I mean, they were in the toilet, but they were not great for a DC comic. And so the prevailing wisdom up there was, yeah, we'll give it to WAID, you know, I mean, let him kill the book. And just we'll let it ride out for a few months and see how it goes. And because Brian and I just thought with one brain, I mean, we were just brothers on this stuff. We would knock stories back and forth, and he gave me all the rope I needed. God bless him. He never changed a word of dialogue. You know, if we didn't talk about it first, he never dictated anything in the scripts. It would just be, we'd work it all out ahead of time. And so he, like, dude, I owe my career to him, and he knows that. I hope he knows that. I tell him all the time.
You hear that, Brian?
Yeah.
I hope he's watching. He probably is watching, actually.
I'll tell him.
He's a good guy. Well, one of the problems may have been, I have two questions kind of tied together. One of the problems may have been the TV show featured Barry Allen. Right. Barry Allen was dead, and there was a Wally West Flash in his place. So the show and the comic may not have tied together. Now, attached to that question, I'm kind of surprised by this, but I'm going to have to ask you. I mean, you weren't a Flash fan? I mean, it seems like you were a huge Flash fan, that you weren't at this time.
I was a fan of all DC characters pretty much equally, except for Superman. It's like Superman, and then second place is everybody else, except for Wonder Woman. I never could get my head around Wonder Woman, but that's a whole other story. But Flash, so I like Flash. Certainly read Flash comics all my life, but it wasn't until Brian and I sat down and went back to core principles. We plotted out that first 4 issues, which was the year one, you know, Wally's origin expanded and retold. And that's kind of the approach I still take to this day. You hand me a character, and I go back to ground. You go back to first principles. You go back to look at the earliest stuff and see what was there that made it work, and just go from there. So that made me a Flash fan. That's the point that I knew at that point in my life as an adult, that, you know, 26, 27, that Wally and I were pretty much the same person in a lot of ways.
What distinguishes Wally from Barry?
Wally is more friendly. Wally is more open. Wally is more, if you're going to have one of them at a dinner party, you're going to have Wally. I like Barry, but, and this has changed some in the last few years, after DC brought him back, you know, with Rebirth and so forth, but, or the New 52. But up to that point, Barry was a stiff. I like Barry, but he was like your dull uncle. And there was nothing terribly interesting about Barry. So, but Wally, man, Wally has a sense of humor. Wally makes jokes. Wally has character flaws. He's impatient. That's a big one, you know, and he always leads with his face, which Barry never did. Mm-hmm. So that's why I really gravitated to Wally, because I also lead with my face.
Yeah, I always thought Wally was more blue collar, and you know, I mean, just from Keystone City, he's a tough guy. You know, Jeff Johns used to say he was built Keystone tough.
Yeah,
and that's Wally, and he was a little bit more lenient on the criminals. He was a little bit more friendly with the rogues, let's just say, if one can be friendly with those rogues.
Yeah.
Than Barry was. Barry was very much like, these guys belong in jail forever. I'm going to put them in jail forever. He was very law and order.
Right.
But I think people liked Wally because Wally just seemed like he would be your friend.
Yeah, exactly. Barry's your uncle. Wally's your friend.
Yeah, and that's largely due to your work on the book. So
thanks.
How did Impulse come about from that?
Impulse came about because we were coming up on issue 100. And if you'll remember, this is a point in DC history that everything was especially dark. You know, we just killed Superman, and we just broken Batman's back, and Green Arrow had lost his arm, and we're coming up on issue 100, and we know full well that, oh God, they're going to ask us to do something horrible to Wally. So we needed to have, if we were going to build a story in which it looked like Wally was going to die, we needed cannon fodder. We needed other suspects. Who's going to die in Flash 100? Wally and I, or rather, Brian and I, you know, came back to this idea we'd visited a lot of times before, but we never could make it work, which is what if Barry and Iris's kid, who lived in the 30th century, because that's where Barry and Iris ended up, what if their kid or their kids somehow made it back to the to the 20th century. And it's one of those ideas we'd had playing around forever. And when it came time to start ramping up terminal velocity and going up to issue 100, that seemed like the place to play that card. How he got the way he was, I have no idea. Just that's the one time in my life, and I'll say this with credit to Umberto, with credit to Ringo, with credit to Carlos Pacheco, who drew this early stories. They're fully, all of them are the co-creators of the character. I'm not the creator, but at the same time, it may be the single best thing I ever had a hand in creating in comics. That's like this one single, I'm talking about a project or a series of books. I'm talking about one character, one thing. Because what I love about Bart is that his name and his powers and his personality all are the same. They all converge in the word impulse. It's the perfect name.
I agree with you. He might be my favorite character of the 90s, created in the 90s. I love him. And I mean, that's where I got my start in comics.
Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't know. We should make it clear to the viewers we didn't overlap, sadly, because you came in. I left with 27 or so, and you came aboard when mid 40s.
50, issue number 50.
Okay.
Yeah, I followed Craig Rousseau, and then Todd DeZago was brought on to write the book, and he was great. I mean, he really captured the spirit of the book. And with respect to you, you were even a character in the book. I don't even know if you know that.
I don't think I know that.
Well, go back and look at our run. Todd DeZago made a little character named Wade. His name was WADE.
I do. Now that you mention, I do remember that. Although my lawyers will be in touch. But yeah, no. That's nice. That's and Todd and I also get along famously. He's terrific. So no, you guys did justice. There's so many times you do. There's so many times you do something in comics, and the rules. You know that the next guy who comes along behind you is going to drop a piano on what you did. That's just the way it works. But I didn't feel that way with Impulse. I always felt like he was always in good hands after I let him go. And until he became Kid Flash, it was a character that I really loved. When he became Kid Flash, he wasn't the same. Neither positive or negative, just wasn't the same character at all to me.
That's how I felt too. I mean, I've been trying to bring Impulse back I tried to create a new Impulse for Flash Rebirth with Wally's daughter.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Irie was going to be the next Impulse, and she was for about 2 issues.
That I remember. I saw like an illustration, and this is secrets behind the comics. Then suddenly, the equity in that character became a nightmare for about 2 months, because I have equity in Impulse, and I have equity in Bart Allen. The equity meaning for the people watching, DC is good about, if you're creating something new for the universe, they'll cut you in. It's not a huge amount, but they'll cut you in. But I didn't have equity in Irie, because that was Jeff. So when she dresses up as Impulse, the legal department's heads exploded, and not just in the way of, oh my God, how do we cut a check? We don't know what to do.
That might be why she went away. I mean,
that may have been something about that. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So talk a little bit about your good friend, Mike Wieringo.
It's the best. He was phenomenal. I mean, the moment I saw his work, I saw an upside down page on Brian Augustin's desk. He had drawn his first story for DC. It was a story for Justice League Quarterly. Just by his sidebar. Marvel always has the better names. Marvel's books, what their quarterly books were always like, Fantastic Four Unlimited, Spider-Man Unlimited. And DC's quarterly books were Justice League Quarterly, Green Lantern Quarterly. Anyway, so Justice League Quarterly, and I was looking at that page upside down on his desk. I said, that's the guy I want doing Flash. It was phenomenal. The work was just phenomenal. And watching him grow from issue, you look at his first issue, which is 80, and by the time you get to like 84, 85, he's full formed. He grew into what he was going to be right off the bat. Yeah. And we just clicked. I mean, we clicked because we were the same age. We grew up in the same kind of areas. We both went to the same college, although a couple of years apart, so we didn't know each other. So, you know, everything about our ethos was we just mirrored each other. We, of all the artists I've ever worked with, and there's been, you know, 100 by now, there are some that are absolutely as good, but no one has ever been able to see what's in my head the same way he does. Like when when you write and I give you a script and I can give you a description of a room, or I can give you a description of a moment, but it's through your eyes. We'll try to hit the same beat, but it's still how you interpret that moment. And I'll get the page back and I'll go, that's not really what I had in my head, but it works, or it's better, you know? But it was like he was taking photographs out of my head. I mean, really, like anything I asked for, anything I wanted in the story, it was exactly the way I would have drawn it if I had drawn it. So we were completely in sync, man. And the tragedy of Mike is that he always felt like he was an underdog. He always felt like nobody cared about his work. He always felt, not in a bitter way, but just in the sort of way he never understood how influential he was. He never understood how respected he was in the community. He just figured he was, you know, just a guy. And I wish he could have seen, you know, how reverential his work is held, you know.
How did you hear that he had passed?
Todd, I think, called. I believe Todd called. And that was a rough day. I mean, we're the same age, you know, and he dropped dead of a heart attack at 42 without any warning, without any you know, there were no signs of it, just boom, just out. And the rug came out from under me. I mean, it was that, it's you know, clearly, you know, relatives, distant relatives, somewhere everybody loses people in their lives, but I think that's the first time I ever lost a dear friend. And I still think about him all the time.
What do you remember most about him?
That he was funny. That he was warm and funny. I mean, not like get you on the phone and tell jokes funny, just he had a great laugh. He was infectious. He had such a great spirit. Well, you know, it's funny when you ask that and listen to my answer, it has nothing to do with his work, does it?
Mm-mm.
It's that I just loved him, and everybody who knew him just loved being around him. He was warm. He never felt like being the center of attention. He was not the life of the party guy, but he's the guy you still want at the party because he contributes some sort of positive air. Like I said, I just wish he knew how much we think of his work even today.
I hope he hears you. I miss him a lot. I liked him. I didn't know him as well as you did, but he was a lot of fun. He was a great guy. It was shocking to lose him so quickly. Moving on, because it's all right. Humberto Ramos.
Yeah, thanks for the room down, man.
I'm sorry. That needed to be said. He looms large in your story, and he was, you know, I think I wanted to hear what you had to say about him.
Yeah, all good, all good. So what else you got, Coach? What else you got?
Humberto Ramos.
I'm sorry, you dropped out for a second there.
Oh, yeah, that's because I'm getting Facebook messages. Tell me about Humberto Ramos.
No, man, when we found him, when Brian Augustin found him, you know, he was like 9 years old, and he was a wonderkind already. Like there was such life and energy to his work, and what he did right off the bat was he managed to synthesize all the best energy of manga with the straightforward storytelling style of American comics. And he took impulse from issue 1 and made it his own. He's the guy who gave him the giant feet. He's the guy who gave him the crazy hair. And working with him, we didn't really work together at first because English at that point was not a language he was terribly comfortable with. He lives and still lives in Mexico City. So he would have the scripts translated, I think, or he would just kind of make his way through them slowly. But once we got moving and I saw what he was doing with the pages, we got along like a house of fire. I remember I played cruel jokes on him. He didn't, because again, English, not his native language. I remember early on, I'd asked for like a spigot in a panel. He just needed somebody to be turned into a spigot. And I forgot what I got back, but it wasn't a spigot. And he wasn't being defiant. He just didn't know. So Brian and I started putting English words in there and asking for things just to see what he would give us. And I think when we asked for a Zamboni and he gave us a Zamboni. We knew, all right, dude, you're on to us. Yeah, yeah. And
he was great. I loved Umberto.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about something that was a little bit controversial in your career. And I remember this vividly being like a point. This was when the internet was kind of new, and this was a point of outrage on the internet. And you can be as graceful and gentle about this as you care to be. Captain America with Ron Garney versus Heroes Reborn.
Man, I don't need to tippy toe around this, man. This is not. Look, again, for those of us just joining us, you know, the book went at some point in the 90s. Marvel decided, you know, we'll give our big 4 books over to the Image Comics guys because their books are selling better than ours, and we'll see how that goes. And, you know, in their defense, those books did sell like gangbusters. They were terrible, but they sold like gangbusters. So we were given Captain America without knowing that we only had 9 or 10 issues to go. We got it not knowing that we had already been sold off. So we didn't know that until 4 or 5 issues in. So it hurt. I mean, I got to say, I mean, I wasn't like flip the table angry, but you know, it did kind of suck. We were really hitting our stride.
It was going to work out. Ron Garney's Captain America looked amazing.
Yeah.
And that book really, really felt right for the first time in a while.
I've always said if I did that book with just Joe Average Guy, you know, nobody would have noticed. It was Garney that made people look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we're off for a year, and then the books are going to come back to Marvel, and you know, I don't remember there being any conversation other than, well, of course you guys are coming back to the book. So that was nice. I didn't have to fight for it again. Yeah.
And you ended up coming back and doing a little bit of Captain America. What was it? Sentinel of Liberty.
Yeah.
So you know, you have a long history with the character. It's kind of it feels like a broken history with the character. I mean, you know, like a potential kind of unmet. Would you say? I mean, what?
Yeah, in the sense that which I guess in the sense that I've had like 4 bites of the apple at this point, and yet not a really long, unbroken run. Is that kind of what you mean?
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah, and I wonder if what you're doing at this moment is kind of like making up for that. Do you have plans to kind of, or you know, another way to ask this is anything that you're planning on the book now a story that you meant to tell 20 years ago and didn't get to?
That's a good question. One of them is, but not that many. What I find great about that character is there's just so much to mine about him. When I take over a character, one of the first questions I ask is, what is the worst possible thing that could happen to that character? And that's the story you want to do. And you know, the first time around it was, you know, the Red Skull is transferred his blood into your body, and now you're bonded to the Red Skull. You know, second, then it became, okay, being exiled from your country. That's the worst thing that could happen to you. So when I came around to it this time, I thought I was out of worst things that can happen, and then we found one. And it's not a secret. I mean, you've already solicited the cover of 698, I guess, where he's frozen in ice and will wake up in the future again. It's a replay of his, and he can't go back. So that's where we're going for the time being.
The chat is going crazy saying, like, turning him into a Nazi. You're going to have to comment on that.
Sure. No. You know what? It's a story.
Can you fix it?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't do a story fixing it per se, because I hate comics that are about other comics. I just really felt like if people's complaint about Secret Empire, if part of their complaint was it went on too long, then why give them more? You know, I'm not going to slam anybody else's story. And, you know, Nick Spencer's a good guy. It's just that by the time we came on, obviously people were hungry for Steve Rogers to be Steve Rogers again. So I didn't really feel, you know what I'm saying? I didn't really feel like doing a palate cleansing story where it was all about, you know, the fallout from Secret Empire and reminding you about Secret Empire. I just thought it was better just to go clean slate and give a nod to it.
Does that mean ignoring it? And moving on, like ignoring it and moving on.
Yeah, not to say it didn't happen, but just ignore it and move on.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
That makes sense.
what happened, what happened to the character, not, all I can do at this point is just do the best stories I can with the Steve Rogers that we all know and love.
Okay, there's a guy named Switchpoint in the chat who was asked this question 50 times. And
Yeah.
He says, please ask. He said, please, please ask about Flash and Green Lantern, the Brave and the Bold. What was it like working with Tom Pyre, Barry Kitson, and Tom Grunberg?
Oh, is that Pyre actually asking? I bet it's Pyre.
No, it's not.
No, that was also great. I mean, Barry and I had worked together on Legion 93, 94, whatever it was, the Legion book. So we got to know each other there. So we had done, Brian Augustin and I had done JLA Year One, which is our 12-issue miniseries that sort of showed the back history of how, in post-crisis world, how the Justice League got together. Barry did that with us. Well, when we were done with that, we thought, all right, well, there's a market for those stories that harken back a little bit, not in style to the Silver Age, but do the characters of the Silver Age. So doing Flash and Green Lantern, which was basically a JLA Year One sequel, basically, that was an easy sell at DC. And I don't remember why Brian didn't have time to do it at the time, but Pyre and I worked together really well. He's also one of my best friends. We talk on the phone every couple of days. And it's fun to work with people in comics, right? I mean, collaboration is the best, isn't it?
Yes.
I've written 2,000 comic book stories, and you could count on the fingers of both hands how many of them I have written without first calling up Tom or calling up Brian or calling up Gail or knocking this around with somebody else. I almost never just sit down and go, all right, let's go, and then not talk about it with somebody. That's the fun part.
There's a hashtag going on in the chat right now. Hashtag hug WAID.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. Yeah.
They all give you a hug. You're making people happy.
I don't think they really mean that. I don't think they really mean hug, but okay. Well,
I think they do. You'd be surprised. All right, so let's just go right to, all right, so you've been working for 7 years. That's it. I mean, it probably felt like a long time to you, but really in the span of your career, you've been writing comics at this point for only 7 years, and suddenly Kingdom Come.
Yeah.
A masterpiece.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's Alex Ross. That's Alex.
No, well, hold on.
Yeah.
It is Alex Ross was instrumental. That story was dynamite. That story was inspired. That story, anyone, I think somebody else could have drawn it. It still would have been a masterpiece. So where did that come from? How did that hit you?
That happened because Alex had done Marvels with Kurt Busiek over at, across town, and he came to DC because he loved the DC characters, and he had like a sheaf of illustrations of character sketches, like a bunch of them, and he had like a couple of 3 pages of handwritten notes about what he thought a story would be. Maybe more than that. It wasn't a whole lot more than that. It was all handwritten stuff. But he knew he couldn't write it himself. He needed a writer. He went to a couple of other guys at first, and they weren't gelling. I don't want to throw out names because they're all good guys. But finally, they brought me in to meet with him, because if you're going to do a book that's really so grounded in DC lore and takes all its cues from DC history and DC's sense of heritage, then I'm the guy to talk to, because I know everybody. I know all the characters. So sitting down with Alex at lunch with Archie Goodwin and Dan Raspler was when we sealed the deal. I took my cues at first from Alex. I went to his house in Chicago. We talked about the story back and forth. Again, collaboration. It was never just a script. It was never just an illustration. I've never collaborated that closely with anybody before. We, in the best possible sense, we argued about every single story point. And I don't mean like arguing like go to hell. I just mean like arguing and getting heated sometimes, but never personal. Just, we're the only 2 people in the world who can have a debate about Martian Manhunter for 45 minutes. and so that's every scene, every page, every line of dialogue, he would fax me layouts, and I would call him and go, maybe we should do this and that. So it was a real back and forth, but I think we nailed the landing. I think.
How'd you feel about the sequel?
I think we nailed the landing. Wait, My Sequel Kingdom, that sequel? Yeah, it was well intended. It was it was well intended. It was, everybody, all the artists did a great job. I bit off more than I could chew. Whatever. Anyway, hyper time.
All right. Let's talk about cross-gen. A good thing?
Man, slowly I turn. All right. Man, we all sort of, after a while, I remember the day we all got in a room and somebody brought up on the web, like the 17 things to look for if your kid is in a cult. And like we matched 14 of them.
To cross-gen.
It was it was run by, a multimillionaire who had gotten out of the business of doing whatever he was doing, sold to Ross Perot, I think, and decided he wanted to do a vanity comic book publishing thing. And he brought me in to talk to me about basically being his right-hand man and running the place. And at that point in comics, this is before Quesada and Gemmis came on at Marvel. This was when things at DC were in pretty much a disarray. This is a point at which, 1999, when nobody had any ripcords. Everybody was falling and nobody had any ripcords. And here's a guy with a ripcord. Yeah. He seemed to have a plan. Okay, that seems to like that might work. You go in.
It's like a cult.
It was exactly like a cult. What he would do is you had to work in the office. You had to work in the building. It was, no freelancers. I mean, they dabbled at first, but basically early on, it was everybody had to come work at CrossGen. It was a very cult mentality. You were working in a giant dark warehouse with no windows and no clocks. And everybody was working in little tiny cubicles. And he saw himself as a benevolent man, and the rest of us kind of saw him as an angry tyrant. So,
wow.
He put on a brave face. He put on a good show, when he recruits you. But then you get in there, and he just liked to noodle. I will never forget listening to him stand there. He went over to some artist's table and said, "Well, that doesn't look right. Draw that again." I think it was a character's hand or something like that. And he came back an hour later and said, "No, that's not right. Fix it." And then he came back an hour later and said to the guy, "Just go on home. Go on home for the day."
Whoa.
Yeah, that was his managerial style. So ostensibly as a second in command, I tried to make it clear early on, look, I'm running the room. You can run the company, but if you got problems with the people in the room, come talk to me, because that doesn't fly. And for the first few months I was there, I was his Jiminy Cricket, because he was a millionaire who had never had anybody say no to him. And I didn't care. Like I couldn't find other jobs in comics. So I sat on his shoulder and I was his conscience. And for the first few months, he listened to me. And I believe, and I was told over and over again, that I was a pretty good influence on him and on the company. But at some point, he just got it in his head that he knew everything. And, so what he would do is he'd hire you. He'd bring you down to Florida. He'd pay your moving expenses, but if you left within 2 years or were fired within 2 years, then you had to pay all that money back.
Wow.
You got,
what the hell?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not a completely unusual situation, but it was a weird situation to put people in. Imagine if I told you, Ethan, that I'm going to bring you down and I'll pay your moving expenses, but if I fire you within the next 2 years, you still have to pay me the moving expenses back.
That's terrifying.
So that's why a lot of people were there. A lot of people were like, "Oh my God, I got down here and I'm here for 6 months and I realized I'm working in an insane asylum, but I can't leave. I brought my kids down. I brought a house." So it was dark. And the moment it all fell apart was December. Oh, Jesus Christ, man! It's only the most important day in American history, September 11th. And we're all in the offices. We have no idea what's going on. People, TV coverage, 9 o'clock in the morning, stuff's going on. Oh my God, what's happening? We're all gathered around these little TVs. freaking out. We don't know what's going on. Most of us don't even, many of us didn't even have our families anywhere nearby. Just so we, you know, we didn't have anybody to, we were calling our families going, what's going, you know, if things go wrong, I'm sorry, I loved you, you know, if we all blow up, we didn't know. One of the women there, her sister was working in one of the buildings. Now, luckily, afterwards, we find out she got out okay, but we didn't know. She's melting down. In the middle of all of this, Mark comes in and says, everybody back to work. Everybody back to work. We're not going to let the terrorists win, or whatever he said. Everybody back to work. And I don't remember what happened next. All I remember is everybody told me I just went completely berserk on the guy. I didn't punch him. I just was screaming at him so loud. All I remember is going back to my office and punching a hole in the wall. Who does that? What kind of monster does that? What kind of monster on September 11th comes in and says, get back to work? So that's the guy you're working for. So then he, you know, I leave. I can't deal with that anymore. We're going to talk about happier things in a minute. I left, couldn't deal with it anymore. He then, you know, as you saw in the whole world, so the company started sliding, not because I left, but just it started sliding. The sales weren't doing well. He wasn't meeting the projections he wanted to meet. He slowly went out of business, but in doing so, he stuck a lot of guys with, you know, with unpaid, you know, unpaid invoices and stuff. That time, because enough people had stopped working in the offices, he was working with a lot more freelancers, and they were getting stiffed. And so I was so angry at this that I set up a fund for. I said, look, if you want to sue him for back pay, I will pay, as long as you're doing the legal work, as long as you're doing the paperwork and the expenses, I will cut you a check and I'll cover your legal fees. And a couple, 3 guys took me up on that, and they won in small claims court. God bless them. I hate bullies, man. I hate bullies.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So many good people in comics. I mean, so many great people and we've talked about Ringo, we've talked about Umberto, we talked about Tom, we talked about Brian. So I don't feel like I'm being just Mr. Grouchy, but holy crap, people just had no idea what that was like there.
I never thought of CrossGen as a cult before. I thought of it as a big, boring mistake that happened, you know, right at the turn of the millennium. All the books that came out looked boring to me. I was like, you've got George Perez, you've got all these big name artists, and you've got them drawing pirate books.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't create cool looking superheroes for them. The company's gonna fail. These books are not appealing on a well, anyway, yeah, what you're saying is even makes it far more insidious and scary. I'm you know, boy, good for you.
And worse, man, it was him and his cousin Gina that neither of them had ever had any creative experience, but these are all ideas that they thought about when they were kids. So basically, we were a big vanity publishing for them, and they had very, very strong ideas about what all of these books should be. So you didn't get to really create anything at CrossGen so much as you were sort of handed it and then told how to make it work.
Did you feel like he was buying all of his comic book idols as friends?
I kind of, to some degree, there was a sense of accumulation. I will never forget, in his office, he had the bow that Errol Flynn used in The Adventures of Robin Hood.
Oh my God.
He's a multimillionaire. Yeah. He's got that bow, and he would talk about heroism. He would talk about, you know, and I bought it early on. I think he bought it too. I think he thought he was a really good guy early on. He always thought he was a good guy, but I think he really bought into the idea that he's uplifting, and you've got to behave honorably, and you've got to behave heroically like your idols. And so that bow meant something to him, and it meant something to me. When I left, I remember telling him, "You don't deserve that thing. Somebody should just take that away from you. You don't deserve that thing."
Yeah. So let's talk about where you are right now.
All right.
I want to fast forward to Archie Comics first of all. Now, Archie Comics. Tell me if I have the wrong impression of this. I mean, Archie Comics seems like a comic book company out of time. I mean, essentially the characters have been around for absolutely ever, and at some point, some brilliant person over there decided to get very, very creative with those characters. They killed Archie, like there's a zombie plague.
Yeah.
They're doing all kinds of very strange and seemingly like inappropriate, but brilliantly creative and compelling things with those characters. And to me, that's kind of how you have to sell comic books, is by outraging and kind of making people just compelling them to buy the books. Now, what's your impression of Archie right now? What do you have to do with it?
It's I will be humble and say I'm just one of the guys, but I'm lucky that I got the chance to help them revive what they were doing. I mean, they called me, said, I think Alex Aguirre, I think, is the one who called me and said, look, we don't know what to do anymore. Like we need, this is our Hail Mary pass. We got to see if we can update the book and make it more relevant to the 21st century, and sort of as wonderful as that sort of Dan DeCarlo artwork was and that whole Archie style, let's bring it up a notch. And we want you to do it. And we want you to do that with these teenagers. And I said, you know, I'm 52 years old, right? And they laughed and said, no, you can do this. And I wasn't sure I could do it either. But once they had Fiona Staples on board, that was when I signed on for sure, because that's when I knew they were serious. You know, if I'd been trying to do what I did with the same Archie style that had always been going, nobody would have noticed. Because like you said, you have to not outrage, but you have to send a shot across the bow, right? You have to shake people up every once in a while and really plant the flag for readers to say, look at me right now. And you're not going to do that with just a new writer coming aboard.
Magnificent. It's really cool. And then the Riverdale show, it seems like they're firing on all cylinders now. And I think you had quite a bit to do with that. So that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat, Mark. Good job.
Thanks. I like seeing my stuff, you know, in other media. It's cool. I mean, it makes you feel, whether it's Riverdale or whether it's Flash or whatever, it makes you feel like you gave something back. You put a stamp on the legend that is going to keep going, going to outlive you, or at least, you know, last for a good long time, outlive your creative career, whatever.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about now. Now you're back at Marvel Comics.
Yep.
Some big changes. Bendis is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I was stunned like everybody else, but I get it. I mean, man, he climbed every mountain there was. He's the only guy who'd written more of the characters than I have, and he done something with everybody, and I kind of get it. He needed something new, and everybody needs that. Everyone needs to. Every creative person, you know this too. You need to change up your pitch every once in a while, and do something outrageous and unusual, or something that breaks your habits, because it just makes you sharper. And so good for him. But man, yeah, there was suddenly a giant sucking vacuum sound when he left, and because he writes 95 books, and you know, they're doing okay. I've seen what they've got planned. I think there's going to be an opportunity for everybody. It's going to be an opportunity for Brian. I think it's also going to be an opportunity for Marvel to go further in sort of bringing new voices in, and not the same old guys who've been writing comics for 30, 35 years, like myself.
Well, we like those guys, though.
We do, and I'll always have a job there. But I think it's important also, not to replace us, but I think it's important. There's so many comics being published. There's no reason why there can't be room for different voices, and not necessarily even voices that I like or you like. I mean, when you were growing up, did you read every DC comic?
No. Every Marvel comic.
Right. But you know, but it's okay to say, this comic isn't for me. Yeah. It's okay to say. I mean, when I was running editorial at Boom Studios, do you think I read every single issue of Eureka that we put out? No. You get an editor under you to do the job and get the comic out and it looks professional, but not every comic is for every reader. Somewhere in the last few years, we kind of went from comics are for everybody to comics are for me. You know?
Explain that.
That it really, I understand the sense of ownership that people have, that fans have of these characters. I have it too, and I had it when I was a fan. But more and more, it just feels like we've narrowed the audience down to a core group that seems very disappointed when they see books that aren't to their taste. And instead of just being able to ignore them or say, it's not for me, there just seems to be a lot of anger there. And I'm not going to make fun of that anger. I'm not going to dismiss that anger. I get that anger, but it disappoints me. I'm not sure what the fix there is, because not every comic is for everybody, nor should it be.
Well, what if they're books that people previously were really enjoying, and then massive changes were made to them? Can you be sympathetic to people who are saying, "Hey, this direction is not okay"? I like people who would have preferred Barry Allen, who were really upset about Mark Waid coming in, and then Wally West, and then Impulse. I want to go back to my Barry Allen. Does that, you understand?
No, I get that. I mean, I'm the guy who lost my mind when John Byrne came and screwed up Superman. Yes, so I say that now. That was my feeling back then. I have a lot more generous opinion of what he did now, but at the time it was like I was just as angry. If there had been an internet back then, I would have been, yelling and screaming right and left. I get it. It just, the part of it, and you know this too, that in no other medium are the creative people as accessible to the audience as they are in comics. And that's been that way forever, really. I mean, you pretty much ever since somebody threw the first comic book convention, and social media has made it even easier to be in touch with your creative people. I can't, send a text to Anne Rice and know she'll read it or whatever, but people can read you, people can, catch us on Facebook or whatever. We're pretty accessible people. And that's great, but when people are really happy with us, they're really happy. But when they're really angry with us, they're really angry. And it's hard as a creative person to shake that off sometimes. That it's one thing to know existentially that anger is out there, that people are mad because, they don't like what's happening to Batman now. But if you're the guy doing Batman and they're on social media yelling at you, look, take criticism. That's part of the job. It comes with the job. But it disappoints me that we haven't, as creative people, we haven't found a way to help bridge some of that anger and help tamp down some of that anger as creative people. I mean, we're in charge. We're the guys in charge of these books. So I don't know what we do, man. I don't know what we do, but there's a lot of anger out there, and I'm not pointing my finger at any one person or any group of people at this point, just saying that's what social media has brought us. It brought us together, and then it brought us apart. I don't know what to do about that.
I don't either, except for this.
Yeah. Well,
that's all I know to do about it, is just to is just to talk. See, the problem is social media is so cold. I mean, it really is just so brief and glib. It invites anger and sarcasm. Those things are rewarded with likes. People think it's cute and funny to be rude and flippant.
Yeah.
And you've got countless numbers of people out there who are reading your social media and taking you the wrong way.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I know what that's about. Okay, I know exactly what that's about. So, what's the solution to that? This is my solution. My solution is long-form conversation with my fans and with other creators, and sometimes guys that I don't necessarily agree with about things that don't matter to comics.
Exactly. I mean, this is why I came on, not only because I know you and have known you for a long time and I like you and we're friends, but also because I think it's important to show that creators, that
we're complex people.
We're complex people, and it's not. It doesn't have to be red versus blue. It doesn't have to be Jets versus Sharks. It's we can all talk about. If I want us to be able to set the example that you don't have to love everything about somebody else to get along with them. Make any sense? I mean, you know what I'm saying.
That's exactly. Well, yeah, I've said that many times. I mean, I've had people say, "Why are you friends with him?"
Right.
Don't you understand? He thinks this, and this, and I'm like, I love them anyway. I don't have to agree with everything that they personally believe in.
Right.
If I only was friends with people who believed exactly what I believe, I'd have very few friends.
Yes,
Because
that's
there
true.
aren't
Yeah.
that many people who fall in line with all of my beliefs and all of my
Right.
feelings and tastes and things.
Yeah.
So, you know, there needs to be a little bit more compassion, a little bit more forgiveness, a little bit more of an attempt to understand. And there are so many people in this business who actually do that. And it's wonderful. You know who's one of them?
Yeah.
Scott Snyder,
That's
one of the
great. Yeah.
greatest guys ever. And when I used to say something that he would disagree with, he'd come to me and just say, you know, that hurt my feelings when you said that, because I don't think that was a very well thought out thing. And I know you and I love you, and I just want you to, what a great guy. And it's just like, oh, you know, let me, when approached like that, I mean, one has to step back and just, you know, re-examine one's behavior and the things that someone is saying, and reconsider your the way you're projecting yourself to the world.
Yes. Yeah.
I think
Getting outside your bubble.
that.
Yeah. Getting
But
outside your
again,
bubble.
that's what this is.
That's what this is. I mean, it's important for us to show that. I think it's important for us to show that we're a community, because it also helps people understand that we are not, none of us, we're all working with the best of intentions. You don't have to like everything we do. You don't have to like anything some of us do, but everybody's working with the best intentions. No one, and I think you'll back me up on this, man, no one is deliberately making comics to piss you off.
I'm trying to make money.
Right. Yeah. And in my case, you know, I'm just trying to have fun, but still nobody, you know, nobody's deliberately trying to inflame the audience, I don't think. I mean, controversy is one thing, but nobody's making comics just to spite you. There you go. Nobody's making spite comics. And you agree with that, and I agree with that. And the fact that between the two of us, you know, we can capture a lot of fans' attention just because you've got your following and I've got mine. Maybe both sides can kind of hear the message from both of us that nobody's doing spite comics. I know it feels like that sometimes if you're a fan, but
the poor business model.
It's a terrible business model.
Yeah. So let's talk about CB Cebulski. Great guy.
Yes, absolutely.
I've known him for many years. Yeah. What is going to change about Marvel with CB?
I think that he is. Well, I do know that we were already pulling back towards center pretty hard. Like that predates CB, and you'll see, you know, with Captain America was, you know, the first volley of that sort of super classic Marvel. And we're going to get back to a lot more of that. But CB is an international man. That's what that's what he's going to bring beyond anything else. CB has been a world traveler for Marvel over the years. So what's cool about that is, man, finding new artists who are exciting, finding new writers who are exciting, finding artists who do things, you know, not in a cartoony style or not in a manga style or not in a style that doesn't feel like comics, but just brand new voices. Name an artist whose work, a brand new guy who'd never done anything before, and you looked at their work and you went, oh my God.
There's so many. And they're the people that, I mean, like, well, when I was a kid, I mean, it was Gary Frank. You know, I saw Gary Frank on the Hulk and was like, whoa. Yeah. You know, his Supergirl, and then obviously the big one is Todd McFarlane.
Yeah,
came out of the blue, just.
Yeah, and it just and to get that, to, you know, to be able to, now we have the whole world to choose from when it comes to being able to pick those guys and find those guys. For me, it was Kevin McGuire, actually.
Oh yeah, he's great.
First page of the first issue of Justice League, and he never drawn anything else before. And I took one look at it, and I'm like, this guy is a star. And it didn't look like anything else anybody was doing, but it didn't look so foreign that fans freaked out. And that's the sweet spot, right? That's the, you know, something new and exciting, but not so foreign that it just doesn't look like comics to you.
And he hates his own work. I did a nice commentary track with him and Keith Giffen last week for like a random issue of Justice League, and he looked at his own work with a snarl on his face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just like, don't you understand how good this is? He's like, it's not. It's awful.
Yeah. That's what we do, though. We always look back at our own. All we do is look back at our own work and go, could have done better.
There it is. All right, so I'm going to hit you with a scary question now.
Do it.
I'm gonna say, Mark Waid, explain yourself.
Do it.
Okay, I'm going to read a tweet.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm prepared.
2 days ago, you wrote on Twitter, "The strong protect the weak. That's the rule. If you have the ability, you have the responsibility. The world's simply a better place when we have each other's backs."
Mhm.
Mark, it sounds to me like you are saying you are strong and other people are weak, and you are there to protect them. Do you want to correct me on that?
Sure. I mean, first off, you don't have to know this, but it helps to know that it comes from a Captain America story in which that was said to a young black girl who was protecting a smaller white boy. That kind of helps give us some context. But it certainly was never about me, which is why you have the words like you and we in the tweet, right? In retrospect, I guess I can see how you might be able to turn that into something about me, but dude, I mean, I was just, it's like putting the golden rule up. I think that's to my mind, and it really is true. To my mind, it absolutely is true. If you have the power to help people, you have the responsibility, because there are going to be times when you need help too, and people can look out for you. And that's what I meant when it's all better when we have each other's backs. It was never about Mark Waid, white savior, and I'm sorry if it came across that way in any way, shape, or form. It certainly was not intended to.
Do you feel weak sometimes?
Sure, Jesus, everybody does. Everybody needs help. Everybody's got issues. I've been very open about the fact that I've got depression issues. I've had them forever, and I deal with them as best I can. So there's good days and there's bad days. Everybody has those moments, and nobody is saying any particular group of people is weak. And nobody's saying any particular race of people is weak. It's just everybody's weak every once in a while. Everybody has their moments when they're not as big as the bully in the room, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. You're with me on this, right?
Yeah. I've been on both sides of that equation many times in my life.
Yeah, we flipped the table together. Yeah. So we shut down a guy in Art Alley. Yeah. But yeah, I'm disappointed that it came across that way. I don't know that I would have chosen my words any differently, because they're the words that I wrote in the comic. I honestly just felt like that would be taken in the spirit in which it was intended, which is like the golden rule, or like just, look both ways before you cross the street. It's a simple maxim that we should all strive towards. Not, I'm not, if I can help people, I will. Sometimes I can't help people. Sometimes people don't want my help. It's fine too. I can't force my help on people. And there are times when I need help. It's a big circle of life.
Good answer. Well, how do you feel about answering some questions from the audience here? We have 418 people watching right now, and I'm sure
okay.
Would like to ask you a question. So is that okay?
Sure, bring it. And I'll try to make the answers fairly short, because as you know, if you ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how to build a watch. And that's why we're already this long into it. But go, sure.
All right, guys, bring on the questions. First one. What was it like to work with Gabriel Delato on Spider-Man, and when will he take over Amazing Spider-Man?
Second part, I don't know. Consult your crystal ball. First part, it was good. I mean, there was a guy with a real different look to his work than guys I was used to working with. European feel to it to some degree, but a different sort of energy. I know those are real generic things to say, but I'm not an art critic. All I know was the guy told the story, and he told it better than I could have done on my own.
Okay, here's one that somebody wants you to answer. You can answer this any way you want. Can you please ask Mark about Hydra Cap and what he thinks about it? You kind of already answered that, but you want to expand on
that? My personal opinion is that it was a well-intended story that, for a bunch of reasons, just maybe went on too long. I'm not going to be critical of my peers, that critical. I don't want to be wishy-washy. I don't want to be, I don't want to be shy about it. But at the same time, there's a certain professional courtesy. I don't want to be slamming some other guy's story, because I don't want some other guy slamming my story in public. And just know it wasn't for some people, and it sold like a mother. But we're done. We're past. It's all good.
Moving on from that.
Yeah.
Is there a character that you have not written that you would like to write? I can't think of any.
Captain Marvel.
Oh, Shazam?
Oh, I interrupted you on purpose. Like, you didn't have to finish the question. Yeah. Captain Marvel, the guy who says Shazam, not Shazam, but because I hate that his name is Shazam now, but I understand why, because you can't put the words Captain Marvel on a DC comic book. But yeah.
Give me the first scene of the first issue of your Shazam, Captain Marvel.
That's a good question. I would think it would involve a talking tiger.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, lean in. Lean in.
Lean in. Let's love the the talkie tawny and the whole Marvel family. Elvis's favorite character.
Yeah, the worst thing, Junior was his favorite, right?
Yeah, I think that's where the cape came from.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is take a concept in comics that's been around forever and just like fix it, if you will, without regard for where it came from, or ever go into it embarrassed. Never take any assignment where you're embarrassed about the character and you feel like you need to fix it. It worked fine without you for a long time. It'll probably work fine without you after you go. So just lean into what makes it work.
Oh, here's a kind of interesting one. Please ask him if he believes the customer is always right.
That's a good question. No. I mean, I understand the truism of it. And as a general rule, I believe the customer's right. But always that's the tricky word for me. I mean, come on, when I was working retail and some customer came in and he was a lunatic, or he was rude or abusive to the people around him, and some customer comes in Starbucks and just starts flipping tables. Customer's not right. I'm not comparing that to any of our audience. I'm just saying in general, that's my feeling. But the customer's voice needs to be heard. You and I have a bit of a division about this, and we talked about this, that you are probably, because you actually have a family and dependents, you are a little more focused on, this is a business. You got to make money. This is how you make your living. I have the luxury of not having dependents, not having a wife, not having anybody who else is dependent on me. And that gives me the freedom to be able to be a little less concerned, mindful, worried about what the audience will think, because I just think it's my job to do the best story I can do and not really worry about the audience. But I grant that's a luxury. And I also grant that because if I had 2 kids and a mortgage and, a mother-in-law who lived in the house or whatever, my tune might be changing. I don't know. Another long answer to a very short question. And you're a little more cognizant of that. You're a little more business focused on this. Yes?
Yeah, I believe that the fans need to be heard, and I don't want fans to dictate stories, but if fans are saying, look, we've put up with this character long enough and we want the old guy back, and we're not going to buy this anymore until our old guy's back, the fans need to be heard. I mean, you put characters out there. If fans don't respond to them, you don't stubbornly keep insisting that they accept that character. It's time to 86 that character and give the fans what they want to pay for.
Let me ask you, Ethan, is the customer always right?
I would answer it somewhat like the way you answered it, but a little bit more conservatively. I would say yes, as long as the customer is well-intentioned, is planning on frequenting the establishment, as it were, and is loyal and has good intentions.
It's a transactional business. We give you a story and you give us money, and we try to earn your money because we want to give you your money's worth. It's a transactional business. It's, so in that sense, the customer's always right, because if he doesn't like what we're doing, he can stop buying it. And that sends the signal. It used to always be the case. It's still largely the case that big companies, Marvel and DC, don't make their decisions based on social media. They make their decisions on the profit and loss line. They make their decisions on the ledger sheets, and
Right.
that's also that's the real power of a customer, is just to say, you know, I can't buy this anymore, and that sends the message.
Mark, what are your thoughts on how the current nostalgia market affects comic fandom and their perception of what comics should be? And how do you feel about house styles? That's from Thomas Matthew Byrne.
I don't know if there isn't. I don't see a nostalgia quotient. Do you?
The return of Silver Age characters at DC.
Yeah, but as long as it's done with a modern sensibility, it doesn't feel like nostalgia to me. That's because, I mean, it's like saying Superman's always been a nostalgic character because he existed in 1945. That's just, you know, you've touched upon a nerve. You've touched upon a nerve of, I feel like I often get called the Silver Age guy when I think, no, I'm using Silver Age characters. There's a difference. You tell stories in a modern way. That's what you do. So.
Yeah. All right. So I'm getting a lot of super chats, but I'm missing them because they're going by really fast.
Right.
Hot Pink Geek says, ask him if he wants my Champions comic collage. So she makes collages out of comic books. She made me one. She wants to know, and she's asked several times, she would like to know if she can make you one of your Champions book.
I'd love that. And I'll give you my address right here on YouTube. No, I'm kidding. But if you want to send it to Marvel, they'll get it to me, and I would love that. I love when fans are involved. You know, I really do.
All right, let's see. Jesse N, thank you for the super chat. He says, vote with your wallet. That's correct. I think that's the ultimate power of the consumer, and the consumer insisting that, yes, I am always right. And that's a fine thing to do. I agree with that.
Yeah, let me put a code on that for a second. That's true, but the other thing that happens, and I see happening, it happens in movies with Rotten Tomatoes. It happens with, you know, in other media where everybody thinks one thing is the metric, right? Rotten Tomatoes becomes the only thing that matters when you're deciding to see a movie, which is crap. But I mean, that's the only thing that matters. And likewise, we are very free and loose with sales figures to some degree in comics, direct market sales figures. But that is changing. I mean, we're trade paperback business is picking up more and more every year. Digital is picking up more and more every year. So I think sometimes readers think that because a book isn't selling the same way it was, say, 6 months ago, that it's cratering or tanking, and that's not necessarily the case. You can feel that way if you want. It means that it's not. It just means it's not selling as many print copies in the direct market. So, you know, don't assume that everybody voted with their wallet the same way you did. Make any sense?
Yep.
All right.
All right, 1 million people are yelling at me. Ethan, please ask him about Irredeemable.
Yeah.
But they're not being specific. I don't know what to ask. So talk about Irredeemable.
Sure. It was, you know, it came from, I mean, it's, you know, the basic concept for those who don't know is, you know, what if Superman were raised by jerks? Man of Steel. What if Superman were raised by, you know, emotionally disturbed people? It just, here's a kid who grew up like Superman, you know, grew up with the, you know, the powers and abilities, but without a stable home life. No, I mean, think about Superman. Think that Superman is a little infant and the Kents adopt him and everything goes well. But it could have gone very badly. The Kents could have gotten the kid home and realized the kid can bend steel bars with his bare hands. They would have returned him to the orphanage in a heartbeat, you know, and you would have been afraid of that kid. Imagine if you had those powers. Imagine how easy it would be to accidentally have everyone around you afraid of you all the time. So that was sort of the starting point. So by the time we get to his adulthood, he's kind of off the deep end because he's just, you know, he's never felt connected to humanity. A lot of it came from one moment. And Grant Morrison and I had a conversation once years ago, and we're talking about the early days of the internet, the early days of forums, and the early days of CompuServe and stuff. And even then, you know, outrage and so forth. But we were talking about, see, I say I buried the lead. What we were talking about was Superman has the Phantom Zone, obviously, but he has this thing in his fortress called the Zonophone that allows him to communicate with the Phantom Zone criminals. Now, why you would have this is beyond me. All you could do is you turn it on and it's just full of people screaming hate at you. And Grant says, who would have this in their house? I said, we all do. It's called the internet. And that was a flip joke, but that became, what would your life be like if you were a superhero, but you had to listen to everybody about everything? You're not going to make everybody happy. Superman makes everybody happy because that's the fantasy we built around him. But, you know, if you were really a superhero, there would always be guys out there just taking you down or taking shots or angry that you didn't fix their problem. And imagine if you could hear all that all the time, that would drive you nuts.
What do you think of the Justice League movie, since you're not working at DC and you can be honest?
I can be honest, I really liked it.
Really?
I really did. I went in
I did too.
I went in with a low bar. I went in with my low bar was Superman doesn't murder anybody and you don't make me hate any of the characters. As long as you can do those two things, we're going to be good. And but it delivered. I mean, was it the greatest superhero movie of all time? No, but it was what I wanted out of a Justice League movie. The Wonder Woman was awesome. I think Affleck's great as Batman. I think that everybody all the actors embodied their characters in a way that I approve and I feel good about. Even, you know, the kid who plays Flash or whoever he is in the movie, because if you notice, there are 3 words never spoken in that movie: Wonder Woman and Flash. The word Flash is never spoken in that movie. He's just Barry.
That's weird. Why is that?
I don't know. With Wonder Woman, I think it's because they're trying to figure out a way to say it without being embarrassed. Because remember, she's not called Wonder Woman in her movie either. And remember, in Man of Steel, he wasn't called Superman. There's just I don't know if there's that. It could also be just something as simple and non-conspiratorial as it was on the cutting room floor. It could be that too.
Yeah, that's really, really strange.
I always listen to that kind of stuff when I see these movies, because as an editor, and as a guy who does really good first issues, so you know what the beats are and you know everything you need to know. As a craft thing, I sort of listen for that when I watch a movie like that and make sure that they hit all the beats that the audience needs to know that I already know.
What artists do you want to work with that you haven't worked with yet?
That's a good one. Well, you and I haven't had a chance to do anything together at any great. Pages. Yeah, 2 pages. I mean, you'd bring some life to stuff. I've been lucky. I'm really lucky to be working with pretty much everybody. Honestly, I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head because I've worked with so many guys.
I'd like to introduce you to a fellow named Jason Fabic.
I know the name. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. He drew the Button, the Flash Batman crossover with Tom King. Just interviewed him on our channel, and he is an impressive young man.
Cool.
Really, really good.
Yeah, I remember liking that. I remember liking the look of that. So yeah, I mean, there's still a bunch of. I'm going to be doing this for another 40 years or so. There's still time for me to work with everybody.
Do you have a message that you want to send to your fans that are watching now as a way of saying good night?
Man, you finally stumped me.
I hate that question.
I know, it's a tough question. That's also your subtle way of telling me we're out of time. You're playing me off, but that's okay. I got work to do. Look, I like my fans. I even like the people who aren't my fans. That's fine. You know, just like comics. And if you like comics, just, you know, we're not out to spite you. So just know that, and know that we are trying our best and we want to give you your money's worth. We're more aware of you than you think we are. And beyond that, just, you know, what did I say earlier? You know, the strong protect the weak. That's the rule.
That's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark WAID. There you go. I think that was pretty thorough, don't you, Mark? Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Very much.
Highly recommended. Would talk again.
Good. Tell others. We need more people here. Thank you so much. All right, guys. So listen, if you like the whole show, why not leave comments on the rebroadcast? It should be posted probably in about 30 minutes. It'll be available to watch again. Leave your comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, hit the bell for notifications for future events like this. thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon on Comic Artist Pro Secrets. Good night.